One thing that I tell new members of my organization in the course of their onboarding is that I truly, truly dislike yes men and yes women. And so if I keep hearing, "You're so right, ma'am," yes, ma'am, from any one of my managers or direct reports, I actually take time to stop and challenge them to tell me, what do you really think? I believe it's important, especially in this our Oga, Madam, Big Boss culture, that we who are business leaders, executive directors, senior managers, indeed managers at all levels, constantly do a self and organizational assessment to ensure that we do not create a culture that inadvertently suboptimizes our efforts, output, and where we're going with our business. Where am I coming from? Well, I promise you that I will share. So it was in about 2007 that I heard about the Abilene Paradox for the first time. And this is supposed to have been introduced by some guy called Jerry Harvey as far back as 1974, based off of a story and anecdote he had heard about some family that decided to take a trip to Abilene, Texas. So what had happened, as it is said, is that the father had, the family was chilling over the weekend, and the father suddenly said, "Oh, it would be great to go to Abilene." And then one after the other, his wife said, "Oh, I think that's a great idea." His brother said, "Oh, fantastic idea." The children said, everybody just said, "Oh, it's such a great idea." And so, rather than spend their weekend casually resting, this family packed up, got themselves ready, and everybody jumped into the car and started this journey to Abilene. It was a long journey. They hadn't thought about the weather. Sometimes it was raining so heavily. Sometimes it was so hot and so arid. There was no food along the way because there were no stops. It was just a difficult journey. And so everybody was irritable and hot and tired. And at some point, the father now said, "I really didn't want to go to Abilene." And the wife said, "Well, neither did I, but I thought you wanted to go." And one by one, it turned out as they spoke up that nobody actually wanted to go. But every single one of them had assumed that every other person wanted to go. And so they went along with this decision. What happened was that they then had to stop midway. They still didn't get to Abilene and start another equally tedious journey back, wasting everybody's time, wasting their resources. And rather than being relaxed, they ended up being tense. And you can imagine how the rest of that weekend went. Now, in a business context, where you have a situation where your employees or your managers, including yourself, agree on some course of action that nobody actually individually supports, except you, perhaps the leader, the business owner, because you put the idea forward, then what is happening is that this Abilene Paradox is at play in your organization, and you really need to watch out for it and be sure that by your own leadership style, you have not inadvertently and unwittingly, as I say, lease the penthouse of your organizational structure out to the Abilene Paradox for free. The tone at the top, as we know, actually tends to set the precedent for what happens throughout the rest of the organization. So a situation where the Abilene Paradox is at play because of you, the CEO, I promise you that it's also happening between your managers and their subordinates. And this is going to make for many things. One, it's going to make for many suboptimal business decisions, many course of actions taken that are misdirected actions, many missed opportunities, a lot of wasted time and resources. Now, the Abilene Paradox tends to thrive in situations where communication is ineffective or where there is an unhealthy fear of the authority figures, in this case, probably you if you're the business owner, where there is a fear of challenging the status quo or going against, group consensus, something that we call groupthink, and I'll come to that in a bit, or where there is a dominant culture that actually tends to constrain individuality, that forces people to conform with the expectations of some people who are seen as the power brokers, the favored ones within the system. The Abilene Paradox actually portends some pretty negative and quite significant consequences for any organization where it is established and thriving. One is that it can seriously damage and dampen staff morale, team morale, and it can create a trust deficit, which, as you and I know, is very, very hard to address, and trust is very difficult to rebuild. It can lead to very high attrition rates. your inability to retain talent. And I think today, especially, it would create a situation where it's increasingly difficult for you to retain the younger talents whose own desire for self-expression and their own value recognition is very different from those of us who are a bit older. Groupthink is one of the problems that I spoke about before. Imagine where you spend countless hours, a lot of the organization's resources, and you end up meeting or deciding on things that don't actually reflect the true thoughts of those who you are paying to make those kinds of decisions, where nobody's expressing their opinions, but there's a consensus. So nobody's happy with the consensus, but nobody's going to be the first to say so. What then happens is that it can lead to situations where actually your brightest and your best minds, your best talents may remain hidden in your system until you lose them and you wonder how come they're shining elsewhere. What would have happened is because they have been stifled within the group, or they have looked around and decided that there are only some people whose wisdom and expertise is respected, that their own voices don't count, and so they never speak. And at some point, they live in outright frustration that they're not able to add value the way they would like to. The Abilene Paradox also contributes to a lack of accountability. Beyond that potential for very poor decision making, the fact is that if I'm not really part of the decision, if I don't really have any sense of ownership, then, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really accountable for the outcomes. And that's not good for any system, because you want to have a strong sense of ownership embedded within the culture of your organization. The flip side of that, of course, then, is that it also tends to engender a resistance to change. There are some people that become resistant to change because they feel this is the way we do it, this is the way we always do it, and there's nothing different that is required. So there's a tendency for innovation and creativity to be curtailed because some people just want to keep doing things a certain way. I believe that once you come into any of my organizations, you must be on the outlook for continuous improvement. There is a place for process and procedures that are already laid down, but it's also important that we're thinking of how much better we can make the system, how much more effective and so on, and more efficient for sure. How then do you avoid the Abilene Paradox within your organization? So the first thing is that you really want to build a system of open communication. You want to be sure that your teams and individuals are encouraged to very freely and honestly express their thoughts, express their preferences, where they feel safe enough to have a divergent opinion, where they are assured of a listening ear, and where they know that even if their view is not ultimately the step that is adopted or the policy that is approved, that the fact that they were heard and that they matter is important to them. You don't want groups of people that agree with every position you put forward simply because they want to avoid conflict, or they don't want to be seen as challenging Oga or challenging Madam. And that means that actually you need to be paying attention to your own communication skills. And I'm going to come to this communication issue in a different video. So as business leaders, we want to charge the system and model it such that it's about open and honest dialogue, debate, feedback mechanisms that work. Encourage people to be able to come forward with their best views, even if they are different from yours. What this means to me, therefore, as a leader, is that I need to be confident enough in myself that I don't have to own every single win. That my people know that they can be the ones that bring forward the best ideas that the organization adopts and take the credit for it. Let me encourage you then, if you're looking for how to also dismantle the Abilene Paradox or make sure that it's not established within your organization, is that sometimes you yourself should actively go and seek dissenting opinions and feedback. Be bold enough to test your ideas, and be bold enough, you the leader, to open yourself out to being wrong. There's nothing wrong with presenting some ideas before your people and saying, listen, I want you to tell me honestly, why would this idea work? But I also want to hear as honestly from you why it will not work, so that we don't end up making suboptimal business decisions, so that I feel happy as the boss and as the business leader. I want ownership to be a strong part of my organization. Therefore, I also, as a business leader, and this is for you, need to be thinking of how best I can celebrate and reward openly those that demonstrate this strong sense of ownership, that demonstrates they're actively looking out for areas to improve the system, that they're actively coming back with constructive criticism and looking for ways to improve the system. Because when everybody can see that this is modeled as being rewarded and appreciated, everybody is going to be dancing around with the same mindset of looking for how to do something better as the company goes and grows. One of the ways, of course, that you need to do this is to set up town hall meetings, providing opportunities for your staff, your employees at all levels to be able to share their ideas and perspectives. And in my view, you should stay out of those meetings if you have to. My husband and I decided to stay out of our staff town hall meetings a couple of years ago because we realized that no matter how great we are, no matter how engaged we are with everyone, there are some socio-cultural nuances, there are some even age-related nuances that make it such that no matter how great you are as a leader, no matter the systems you try to set up, some people will never speak up when you're in the room because they see you as, you are the boss, there's respect and all those things. But we want to hear the real things that people are saying. We want to hear their real ideas and be able to, mine the value out of that efficiently and effectively, and let them know that they actually are able to speak, even if it is speaking against something that we have put up, as part of our processes and procedures. One other thing that you can do is to make sure that you do trainings within the organizations around how to give and how to receive constructive feedback. And please, dear business leader, business owner, take part in those trainings. There's no point charging your system with some kind of culture dynamic that you yourself would not submit to. So please don't do that. Let's all learn how to take the feedback, take the punches and roll with them, as they say. My dear business leader, let me leave it at this. We need to be careful that we by ourselves don't sub-optimize the potentials of our business. And part of this happens when we come with this leading out of fear, this command and control style that filters down the organization and then stops us from getting the best out of the same people that God has given us to grow our businesses with. Not only will you, if you allow this, be destroying financial value, but you will also be eroding some of those unseen, softer value metrics like loyalty, like ownership, like commitment that make for the best transgenerational legacy businesses. Let me tell you a secret. You are boss, yeah? But believe me, in the truest sense of it, you are not boss all by yourself. Your people are the most fundamental pillars upon which your business stands, and you want to make sure that you are not eroding the foundation upon which they, the business, and inadvertently, of course, yourself are standing.